Welcome to the Infuse Compassion Podcast, hosted by me, Amy Quisenberry.
And me, Mark Carpenter.
We are on a mission to make this world a kinder place for us all by bringing healthier human connection to communities, families, and organizations of all types and sizes.
Our goal is to create stronger relationships, more inspired teams, increased trust, and improved results.
So let's get started with more ways to infuse compassion into our world. Welcome, Compassionators, to another episode of Infuse Compassion Podcast. Oh my gosh, you are going to be so happy you chose to join us today. Mark, who do we got? Who do we got today, Mark?
We have a happiness expert on with us today, and I'm just thrilled that Michelle was willing to talk to us. Let me tell you a little bit about Michelle McCullough, and then we're going to turn some time over to her. Michelle McCullough started her first business when she was 19 years old, so just a few years ago. And she's currently running 3 companies, including consulting other businesses all over the world. She's the author of 4 best-selling books, including the Make It Happen Blueprint and the Time Blueprint for Entrepreneurs. In addition to being the CEO of Dreamboard Media, which is a digital marketing agency, Michelle is a seasoned speaker and a former corporate trainer who teaches high performance and leadership strategies that boost employee engagement and retention. Michelle has earned the Certified Speaking Professional, or CSP, designation from National Speakers Association, which is no easy task, I might add, and was a national finalist in the Last Story Standing competition. She's passionate about creating happy, high-performing, resilient teams. And she's the lead researcher on the U.S. Happiness Report, which is a lot of what we want to talk about today. She also has her own radio show, which is called Make It Happen, and she entertains and educates business leaders weekly. Since its inception, this podcast has reached almost 2 million downloads. So you can learn more about Michelle at speakmichelle.com. Welcome to Infuse Compassion, Michelle.
Thank you. I am very happy to be here.
I want to jump right into this U.S. Happiness Report and have you talk about a couple of key elements from that. This latest U.S. Happiness Report, it indicated that 87% of Americans feel like they would like to be more happy. Now, why does that matter? Why does happiness even matter?
So the interesting part of the research that we did, and we did it on a few different levels, but we asked 2 different questions. We asked if people wanted to be happier than they currently are, and 81% of working Americans said that they wanted to be happier than they currently are. And then we asked the question, we asked a few other things, we came back to it, and we just said, we asked, do you deserve to be happier than you currently are? And so we added a word in there called deserve, which is so tricky. But what we found is the number actually went up. So 87% of working Americans said that they deserve to be happier than they currently are. And to me, that's at the crux of the issue and the core of my passion that I have witnessed and watched over the last few decades as an adult. Too many Americans who believe that their happiness is not possible because of some sort of circumstance. It could be a label or an experience that they've had, or it could be something that's currently going on in their life. And when they say that they deserve to be happier than they currently are, they're missing what I know to be true, which is happiness is possible regardless of the circumstances that you're in. That doesn't mean that happiness is possible all the time, because as humans, we get to experience the full range of emotion. And that's really the great part about human existence. But what I am on a mission to do is to help people and companies find that they can achieve the kinds and levels of happiness that they dream of, and it's 100% in their control.
So how do you do that? How do people find that happiness that they're looking for? If people are so desperate, and I love that word, they feel like they deserve to be happier than they are. How do you help them be more happy? Because I think another finding of the report was that people didn't feel like they had the skills to be more happy. So
Correct.
What do you teach people?
So it's interesting because they don't feel like they have the skills. They don't feel like they have the power. They feel like it's outside them. And in order to help individuals understand how I teach, I also want them to know that the way that we talk about happiness is toxic in ways that we don't know. And so from the time that we are raising kids at a very young age, we talk about happiness on the end of something, even subconsciously and sometimes inadvertently, where we will say, you'll be happier. You'll be happy when you get to go to your friend's house later. You'll be happy when you get to go to school. You'll be happy when you are old enough to date or are able to drive or get into the college that you want or fulfill the life of your dreams. And we attach happiness to the end of things, even by saying, oh, isn't graduation so exciting? Isn't it so great that you're getting into all these schools? Instead of talking about how are you experiencing and choosing and finding and creating happiness in every day, even when it's not one of those milestone days. And so I think it's important for us to understand that happiness is possible without external circumstances, that we can within ourselves choose that type of happiness. And some people are like, well, Michelle, I have this really hard thing going on. I can't just snap my fingers and be happy. And that's why it takes a toolkit. There are tools and skills that you can have around that when you are having a tricky situation or life is hard, you're in the middle of a challenge, that you can say, how can I experience both? How can I have hard things and also have happiness? And so it's about finding the and so that you can be in some hard things, experience grief, have heartache, and also find ways to be happy even in the midst of those hard things.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of some of those tools? And
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to give away all
No.
your bag of tricks, if you will. But what are some of the common tools that are helpful for people when they're struggling in those moments to find happiness?
Sure. A couple that come to mind right off the top. I wrote a book called The Happiest, which is 30 happy habits to help you live your happiest life. And so there are lots, and I'm not trying to claim that I have the corner on it. We really care about what do you do that helps make you happy? What lights you up? Some people are so excited to go for a run, and that is like the worst drudgery for me on the planet. Yet studies have shown that moving your body is valuable. Like physical activity, even if it's not like going to the gym and lifting heavy weights, walking for 15 minutes makes a big difference. So anything that has that mind body connection that allows you to have that space, and there's so many great parts about walking, but physical activity isn't necessarily number one, but it's one that I think of to help people start to think about the differences that are happening. The other ways that we encourage people is that the study showed that when people are experiencing hardship or challenge, that positivity actually increases their happiness. So just thinking positive thoughts. And for me, one of the ways I feel like and exists here too. You can say life is really hard. Things are really frustrating. We're going through a bunch of challenges. And I know we'll figure it out. And I know it won't last forever. And I know that there are still ways we can be happy in this challenge. So we really work a lot with the and piece so that you can stay authentic and in trust and truth with yourself, but also noting that positivity is important. And while my research backs this up, I am also a huge fan of Martin Seligman, who is the foremost researcher on post-traumatic stress disorder. And you nod your head like you know who he is. But
Yes.
as he went in to do all this research and was called into the army about how do we help all these men and women who are coming home from battle that are dealing with PTSD, and they found that there was one thing that made a difference. And they thought it would be access to counseling or having a great support system or being able to have the resources that were available. But actually, the one thing that determines whether or not someone will heal from PTSD is the belief that they will. So that positive thinking and that positivity can help in even extreme cases of PTSD. And so if you believe that you have happy times ahead, if you can believe and think and act positively, then you're better able to handle the challenges when they come big or small. So physical movement, thinking positively, and even simple things like having a playlist of music that you like to listen to or having a joy list of things that you enjoy doing, all of that can help you. But the bottom line is, regardless of the tools that you use, it's prioritizing happiness daily. It's thinking through, even if today's going to be busy or even if today's going to be hard, how do we prioritize happiness so that there is something good that we can look forward to in every day?
Yeah. Amy, you and I were talking about that belief before. Did you want to follow up with Michelle on that some?
Boy, do I. When I was watching your video, one of your videos, the state of happiness in 2024, I noticed you said people who believe, over and over again. I heard believe, and I thought, this sounds intentional. It sounds specific. It sounds like this is a core component. You didn't say think, you didn't say feel, you said believe. And so I'd like to dig in that a little bit more, because to me, when you talk about people going inside, not looking for external factors, right? But going inside and kind of finding and making this happen. Can you take us a little bit further into the power of the belief?
Yes. I love that you asked this question, because one of the challenges that I have in working with individuals on happiness is too often they say, that's too overwhelming. Like, it's this big ethereal thing that they can't define, can't figure out. They acknowledge, and the research shows, they want to be happier. And even the happiest people, even the people who listed themselves as very happy, said they wanted to be happier than they currently are. So every human has this core innate belief that they want to be happier than they are. And so, but if it feels too big or too grand, they don't know how to go after it. But really, it's as simple as wanting it and believing that you can do it. And that's the first step. Like, belief is the first part. It's just believing that happiness is possible, because there are so many hard things going on in the world. The great equalizer for all of us is that we all have challenges. The problem with looking at the world in that sort of way is that we all have different challenges. And so the ways that we can make our minds try to make sense of, well, so-and-so has just lost a loved one, but so-and-so has a family member who is really sick, but at least he hasn't passed away like so-and-so. Like, we start to do so much comparison. And there are so many other studies that I used to cite all the time before we had our own research about, like, the US Happiness Report and the World Happiness Report used to be linked to how people feel. Like, do you feel like you have a good life? And everyone said they were a 5 on a scale from 1 to 10, because they're all looking around saying, well, I'm happier than so-and-so, but I'm not as happy as this person. And so part of that belief is, I think step 1 is removing your emotional wellness to anyone else. You cannot compare your happiness, your life circumstances, your challenges, or even your celebrations to anyone else. And we do this so regularly, and it's so easy and so prevalent, even more so now with social media, where we look at individuals and how they're accomplishing tasks and what they're doing. And so it's really easy to go, well, I'm not doing it as good. I'm not doing life as good as someone else, or I'm not doing business as good as someone else. And that can feel really, really triggering, especially for people who are trying to figure out what happiness actually is. We don't know how to define happiness without looking at someone else, because we look around and we go, oh, I would love a house like that. Well, that house didn't exist until you knew you had it. And so much of what we want is about what we see. But I try to tell people all the time, happiness is not a race, it's a mission. And when you're in a race, you're so worried about who's running faster than you, how they're running, what they're doing. But you are not in a race, you are on a mission. And your job is different, which means not only is the race different or the end result different, but the way you're running is different, and the way that you're getting there is different, and your lane is different. It's so different that we cannot compare ourselves. And so part of that belief is removing comparison from how we feel, because too often we say, am I happy or not? And we're thinking about not just our own factors, but other people around us. Well, I should be happier than so-and-so, or I am happier than this person, obviously, or I'm not as happy as the Joneses because they just went to Hawaii again. And so there's so much comparison and negative self-talk about what we trust and allow our own emotions to be. And the reality is you can be happier than the Joneses who just went to Hawaii. You have no idea what they're thinking or feeling, but it's not about the Joneses at all. It's really just about you and how you can feel emotions, and trusting your own emotional intelligence and your emotional wellness enough to say, this is how I feel, and this is how I want to feel instead, and taking the steps in between to get there.
That, I have to tell you, first of all, I'm glad you went to the comparison piece, because that was another one of the questions that Mark and I spotlighted, is because I see it. Sometimes I do it. I work hard to not do it. And it's, being somebody who grew up in the 80s, it just seemed like there was so much comparison. And we talk about social media now, but I felt it so strong back then. Being young and feeling like I'm being compared to this person or that person and this person, continuing that. Like, I wasn't comparing myself, but I realized that I was being compared. And then I continued that forward. I'm curious, do you have any specific tools, tricks, anything that when somebody finds themselves in that moment that they are, I just realized I'm comparing myself to somebody. What can they do to get themselves out of it, or even to bring awareness to it?
Well, I think the first step is awareness. And whenever you are comparing yourself to someone else, hopefully you can tune in and go, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to compare what's happening, whether that's professional goals, income, education. There's so many ways we can compare ourselves, and it's so ingrained into our culture that it's impossible to imagine a life without it, because when we go to school, we've got cliques and the popular kids and the student council kids and the band kids, and as adults you've got leaders and CEOs and entry level employees who are all trying to figure out how they fit, and so we use comparison to fit in. Our core need as humans is to belong. And so many pieces of what we do is like, where do I fit to belong? Instead of just saying, do I belong with myself? Am I happy with myself? Am I pleased with myself? And so it's tricky to try to train yourself, but once you become aware that you're comparing your happiness to someone else, it's a lot easier to notice it, which is why we talk about it and teach on it regularly so that people can check in. But the first step is in a moment where when you're trying to decide how you feel and how you want to feel. When you start to compare yourself to someone else, you call it out. You just say, "Oh, I'm comparing myself. I don't need to do that." And then you ask yourself the question, what do I want to feel differently today than yesterday? And you start to just compare your own emotions. And it's not like it has to be in a judgment free zone. It can't be like, well, yesterday you felt terrible, Michelle. Can you please feel happier today? It can't be like that. But we can use our own feelings as barometers to how we want to feel. Yesterday was tricky and hard. Yesterday was so overwhelming. And yet today I'm going to try to make decisions and choose something else without judgment, without anything else, which is why having a gratitude practice is such an important part of our emotional wellness. And we talk about it a lot. I'm not the first one who's ever come up with it, but I am religious about my gratitude practice, because when I can look at a day, as crazy as it is, as hard as it is, the challenges that they are, and I just say, okay, 5 things I'm grateful for. Sometimes it's really quick and easy to rattle off 5 things and to write them down. Sometimes it's harder and I have to sift through a drudge of things to find the ones that I want. But focusing on what's working is so much better on our emotional intelligence than focusing on what's not. And it helps us to better self-regulate our emotions based off of what we know to be true without looking at those external circumstances.
Yeah. Love it. I want to get into a specific area that I know you talk about a lot, which is happiness at work. Because a lot of times I'll hear people say, work's work. You're not supposed to be happy at work. It's just work. That's why they call it work. What's the importance of happiness at work, and how can we make sure that we have happiness at work?
Okay, I love that you brought this up. I'm a little bit nerdy when I talk about this. And some people ask, Michelle, why do you talk about happiness at work, and why don't you just talk about happiness? I'll talk about happiness all day long if you want. But the reason why I focus so much on happiness at work is because we spend a lot of our time there as humans, and especially as adults. And what's interesting is I love what you just said there, because the work landscape has shifted. Even 20 years ago, we approached work differently than we approach it now. 20 years ago, when I was looking for a job, I was living in an environment where I partially feared a boss, partially feared what a potential boss would be, but just knew that my job was to go to work, do the job, take a paycheck home, and then go and do whatever I needed. Well, interestingly enough, as the generational shifts have come and we have new generations of humans who are coming in and saying, why do we do that? Why is that our lifestyle? Why do we pick that? And these younger generations have really pushed on us to re-examine not just work-life balance, but the ways that we approach work. And so now when this new generation 20 years later is going into the workforce after completing college, or even before they complete college, they aren't looking at a job saying, okay, where can I go to work and get a paycheck? They're asking themselves two questions. Number one, where can I work that supports my lifestyle? And they're considering everything in lifestyle, from traveling, time off, to time with kids. Like, they value that. Not that we didn't value it, but we didn't think that we could ask for it. We didn't think we could ask for that kind of flexibility. And now they're also asking themselves the same question, but internally they're saying, do I belong in this location? Meaning, can I bring my talents, gifts, and skills and abilities? And will they appreciate me, love me, care about me? And so the workplace really has shifted because this generation started to ask different questions, and the generations behind us, which now make it so much better. Now I'm 20 years in, 2 decades into my work career, and I work for myself now. But if I were to go get a job, it would feel totally different now than it did when I was coming out of college or looking for career jobs. And so I love happiness in the workplace. But one of the interesting factors is that we wanted to see the correlation between happiness at work and happiness at home, but also, what is it at work that makes you happy? And we found that 80% of working Americans feel more successful at work when their leadership, whether that's an owner, manager, supervisor, or boss, feels and expresses happiness. 80% of working Americans feel more successful at work if their bosses are simply happy. And I found that to be mind-boggling. So even in this generation where we have people who want a lifestyle, they want to be able to travel, they want to work from home, which we can talk about that too, which is kind of funny, but they want to travel, they want to do all of these things. But at the end of the day, they feel more successful at the job to be done if their leaders are just being happy or feeling happy. And I think that is so telling, because we've seen the studies before that say 80% of people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, which is still true. Like, the research still backs that up. But it's that we're finding that the older generations are used to care about stability from bosses. And these younger generations are caring about creativity and support outside the office and other ways, because they actually don't fear their bosses in the same way. Not because, and they probably do, they just don't express it, but they want everyone to be their friend. They want everyone to like them. They want everyone to feel like that they're on the same level, even if they aren't, but just like, can we collaborate? Do I trust you? Can we have good conversations? And so the landscape has shifted, and yet we are still doing old strategies when it comes to leaders, when it comes to culture, and we need to be doing all new things to approach happiness at work. Sorry, that was a really long answer, and I even cut myself off.
No, that was a beautiful answer. I love that statistic that 80% of workers feel more successful when they see their leaders as happy. So what are some things, I'm going to go straight to our audience that some of them are business leaders. So what can business leaders do to project that to their team? How can a leader infuse more happiness? We call it compassion too. I think there's a strong connection between happiness and compassion.
Yes.
But how can they do that within their teams, within their organizations?
And I want to add, authentically.
Yes.
Authentically.
Ooh, I love that you mentioned that, Amy. If I don't come back to authenticity, remind me, because there's one thing I have to say about happiness at work and authenticity. But number one, simplest thing ever is to smile more. And it sounds so silly and almost sounds idealistic. Well, what does a smile have to do with it? Why can't they work if I'm just smiling? But they notice that they say feel and expresses. So you could feel happy but not express it. And we talk about like my resting face. Somebody took a picture of me at a basketball game last week, and then it ended up in the newspaper. And so my friends were texting me pictures of me at a game. And it wasn't that I cared at all about what was happening in that moment, but I looked angry. Like, I looked mad, and I wasn't even mad. But my resting face doesn't look happy. People used to say to me, Michelle, are you stressed? And I'm like, no, I'm so happy. And my voice sounds happy, but even right this minute, I'm not smiling until I intentionally choose to smile. And so you can feel happy and not express it. And so that can happen first and foremost with smiling. The second is that the connection piece is really big. People will feel like you're happier if they can hear things about you. Gone are the days where leaders are like, I have to be buttoned up. I have to be put together. I have to be so rigid so that they know that they can trust me and so that they know that I mean business. Now they want to know, what are you doing on the weekend? What do you do for fun? What is happening? Be willing to have some of those water cooler conversations, ask questions and answer them. So ask your team, what are you excited about? What are you doing this weekend? What's making you happy? Good leaders will remember those things and ask about them on Monday so that they're following up and that they're just having that kind of compassion and friendship that matters. But they will also be willing to engage in the conversation. They're like, what about you? What are you doing? And then you share. And then when they follow up with you, like you're building that kind of relationship. So simple things like smiling and the tone in your voice, and even bigger things that aren't that big, but just expressing an interest and having some of those conversations matter. And I didn't forget the authenticity piece. So forgive me for coming back and being so long-winded about this, but especially
I was going to hold you accountable to the authenticity too. I was waiting for it. I think Amy was too.
Thank you. One of the core drivers for me was looking at different generations and how generations are experiencing the workforce, experiencing happiness in the workforce, and experiencing their leaders. And so everything we did, we divided by generation and gender. So I have everything from Gen Z, younger millennials, older millennials, and Gen X, and all split by different levels. And especially when we're having this generational conversation, we are also saying we need you to be you. Like, we can't have you be a shell of you. We can't have you be a fake of you. Like, we need you to be you. And that authenticity is so important. The challenge is when you have an authentic 20-year-old entering the workforce and an authentic 50-year-old trying to figure out how to collaborate and communicate, and they're bringing their authenticity to the table, and that's what we need to have. But then there's lots of clashes. There's clashes on values, clashes on interests, and clashes on communication or how to proceed. Or one generation wants to be innovative about it, and another generation wants to take the tried and true course. And like, you can decide who is who, because I'm really careful not to be in this generation's bad and this generation's good, because they all provide value. But the only way authenticity works best, both emotionally and also in the workplace, especially when you're dealing with a diverse team, is the careful balance between authenticity and adaptability. And authenticity is at its core, but it works the best when coupled with adaptability. And so when you're adaptable and willing to be flexible, it provides a healthier office environment. And that doesn't mean that there aren't times where where one person shines out over another, because that just kind of happens from time to time, or that one person's decision is happening. We can't always choose everyone. But when we bring our authentic selves to the table, and when we express our authenticity, we can feel in alignment with ourselves, even if the correct answer in the end is for us to adapt. And so I love both of them coming together and being equally committed to the authenticity of bringing our best selves and the adaptability of doing what's best for the organization moving forward.
Michelle, sorry, you are a powerhouse of brilliance. Thank you. This has been absolutely incredible. As we move to a close, I want to give you a full hour, an hour and a half. I want to give you the whole day, right? But leave us, as we transition, leave our listeners with one tip. If there's one thing that you can give them to infuse, as we've been talking, happiness into their world, what's that one tip?
Oh, that is like choosing your favorite kid when you have lots of kids. But what I will say, and I think what's coming to my mind that is the most important for this conversation, because we could talk for hours about this. I could talk for hours about this, but I'm especially mindful this week with a couple of things that have happened about the prevalence of artificial intelligence and work in the workplace, at schools, everywhere else. And I found myself questioning, like, is that real or is that AI? Like, was that email real or was that AI? Was this paper that I read, was that real or was that AI? And I feel like in the age of AI, emotional intelligence needs to take center stage. And we need emotional intelligence more now than we have ever needed it before. Fake emotions lead to fake connections. And so if we are not emotionally intelligent in our own way, and to me, emotional intelligence is understanding emotions and believing we have the power to change them. And when you are emotionally intelligent at home, at work, with your friends, interacting with strangers at the store, in the car, and your ability to be able to say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I want to feel instead, is such a powerful shift. Because too often we see people who are like, oh, I'm just mad. They want to be mad. They thrive on being mad. Or they're sad and they feel like they deserve to be sad. And they probably should be sad because they're dealing with really tricky things. I think the most important thing to remember is that you can feel whatever you want to feel as long as you believe, like we've talked about, that you can make those decisions, and that sometimes two emotions coexist. You can be sad and happy. You can be frustrated and flexible. You can feel grief and you can feel peace. Even though they might come in conflict sometimes, even the belief that those two can coexist together will help you feel much more fulfilled, and not that you have to choose one or the other.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us, Michelle. And I hope we call our listenators our compassionators because they've opted in to this idea of compassion. And I hope all of you compassionators can take some of this and find a way to not only infuse compassion, but infuse happiness into your own life, into the lives of those around you. Amy, any last comments before we wrapped up today?
Thank you.
I
Thank
just
you
want
for
to
having
say,
me.
yes. And Michelle, I want to say, I didn't mean to speak over you. I'm very sorry.
No, that's my fault.
I want to genuinely thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. I know you are making a difference, and I want to thank you, because happiness feels like, to me, the vitamin everybody needs to be giving themselves. That you've got a vitamin C, right? Vitamin C, but now we have a vitamin H, and that's for happiness. So I hope everybody takes their vitamins daily.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Infuse Compassion Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share a review and like the podcast so other compassionators can join us. Until next time, let's all do something each day to infuse compassion into the world. For more information on our guests, see the show notes. For more information on Mark and Amy, go to infusecompassion.com.